Right, let's talk about shades of grey. And again, acrylic paint's great for mixing shades of grey, great for finding shades that are nearly but not quite the original colour to do weathering with. Again, I'm going to show a range of Games Workshop colours. Got some greys here. Again, fantastic set of names. So I've got a colour called Dawnstone. I've got Storm Vermin Fur, Skaven Blight Dinge, and Eshin Grey, which sounds really dull in comparison to some of the other names. Dryad Bark, which is a brown colour, and good old Abaddon Black. Now, all of these colours are useful in various different ways. Dawnstone is very nearly departmental grey, which is the grey that used to be on rail freight. So it's actually the rail freight grey colour that was on large logo rail freight locos, but it's a faded shade of it. So if I go back to my various wagons here, I'll pick up this ZKV. That's actually Dawnstone. That's not departmental grey. That's Dawnstone, and the yellow as well is also mixed by hand. And again, that's done with Games Workshop colours. This is a ready to run Hornby Shark. Now they've managed to pick a faded yellow and a faded grey. Those are nowhere near the original colours. In fact, if I hold the Dawnstone up against it, you'll see that that's actually noticeably darker. So Hornby have actually picked a colour photo and gone straight from that with the colour. That's a very, very light grey. That's definitely pre-faded, so I didn't really need to do very much to that apart from do the roof and the chassis. Here's a propelling brake van. That again is Dawnstone, but with a little bit of white added to make it lighter, slightly lighter, as that is a very faded colour. And I've used a red colour there to do faded rail freight red. That's a colour called Squig Orange, of all things, and that's actually straight from the pot to give a faded rail freight red colour. And here's a kit built. So here's a kit built Shark. Again, that's Dawnstone on the sides and a hand mixed yellow colour, which is a pretty close match for rail yellow, warning panel yellow. So all of those light and mid greys can be mixed up to do your slightly faded shades on wagons and vans. But actually the other colours, if I move that out of the way now, the other colours, so Skaven Blight Dinge, Eshin Grey, you mix those with black and actually you can get a very good colour to paint your underframes with, to save you having to paint everything black and then get the airbrush out and spray track colour on it. So all of these wagons that I've got here, so this bolster C conversion, the propelling brake van, that CCT that I stripped off in the enamel weathering demo, this pipe wagon, and even the ZKV. That's not painted black and then sprayed with track colour, it is just painted that colour mixed up by hand. I'll do that by taking either one of these two colours. In fact, I'll go with the Skaven Blight Dinge. It's a slightly greener shade than the Eshin. Eshin Grey's quite a close match for Express Parcel Grey. If anybody needs to touch in an Express Parcel Grey model, you can do it that way. So again, I'm going to put a small amount of small amount of grey on there, and I'm going to get a similar amount of black and mix it in. And then I'm going to mix in a bit more. And I'm going to mix in a little bit more. So I'm going to make that quite dark. So that's getting close to an X-Works wagon that's not been in traffic long. So I'll mix that up. If I hold that up, you can see that it's very dark, but it's not black importantly. If I just wash this brush off so you can see, and then I dab a little bit of black next to it. If I put the two next to each other, they're not the same. If you look at this one, if I cover that up, and you look at that, you might think that that's black, but it's not. And that's the trick with doing weathered underframes, is you trick the eye into thinking it's a black underframe that's dirty and not a grey underframe. To make it use a little bit better, just a little bit of this dryad bark, which is a kind of flat brown colour. Might as well mix the black in while I'm at it. And then what I get is I get a nice browny grey black colour. It's mixed up, it's nice and thin because I've put some water into it, and I can just paint that onto any of the underframes that I've got. And in fact that's exactly what I've done with this van that I'd stripped off in the enamel weathering workshop, where I'd put some extra layers of enamel washes onto the surface to try and cover up the horrible factory weathering finish. Now that's near as damn it done. So you can see what I've managed to do is I've managed to get most of the factory weathering off, and by using those enamel washes I've managed to take out some of that yellow tint to the remaining factory weathering that was on there, that very dusty sandy colour that was left on it. So both ends are looking pretty good. And then there's the sides. That's the second side where I managed to retain most of the lettering on it, and that's the first side where I'd gone a bit mad and taken off a bit too much with the thinners. But actually, aside from reinstating the lettering, I'm going to say that's now complete. That is a suitably dirty but not absolutely filthy van to put in a parcels rake. And this is the colour that I painted onto the underframe. And again, that's to do with that hyper-realism that I was talking about in the enamel weathering videos. It's about that technique to make things look slightly more real than they really are, which kind of fools your brain into thinking there's shadows down there. Our models are so much smaller than the real thing that any light source is going to highlight bits that in real life you wouldn't see. In real life, lighting is flat and directional. There's a big sun and it's up there coming down on the top of things, or it's at the side of something coming in. So underframes generally are always in shadow. They're very difficult to see. So by painting that, instead of using that sort of factory weathered yellowy colour on the underframe, painting the whole underframe a very dark grey, in flat lighting conditions where you can see it, it will look black, but you'll know it's not black inside your brain somewhere. It will be working out that it's not quite black, but you'll think it's black to start with, and you'll see the shadow rather than seeing the fact that it's that horrible weathering colour, and it'll look more real to you because you're not seeing that factory weathering splurged on everything. If you're seeing it under strong lighting, then those shadows will actually be accentuated and you'll still see the van and a dark chassis, and that's more like the real thing will look. So I'm going to put that to one side. I'll get some transfers on it, take some still pictures, so when you've watched these videos hopefully there'll be a little gallery of still pictures to show you what I mean. And I'll try and put some swatches together as well for these colours so that you can see that they're not black. So in the same way that I've mixed that up and just put a bit of black next to it, I'll just create a little swatch panel, take a still photo for everybody so that you can see that there's that shade of grey, there's the black, and then there's those ways of getting grey out of it that make your chassis and your underframes look weathered. The other thing to pick up on these vehicles is that wood is always a lot darker than you think it is. These days when you go to a wood merchants or you go to a B&Q store or something, you'll find timber and it's always pine, almost invariably pine or some kind of fir tree, and that's very light coloured. The woods that are used on railway wagons tend not to be that kind of wood. They tend to be harder woods that are a lot bit more long lasting, and they also tend to be treated to stop them rotting or crumbling, and that makes them quite dark. Of course, in the days of the railways that would have been creosote quite often, which is a substance that's now banned. So these days they'll be pressure treated. If you go to a preserved railway, they'll have pressure treated wood, which can be all sorts of strange colours due to the chemicals that are used. And that tends to still be quite light. So when you see a freshly planked wagon, the wood will be quite light in colour, almost sandy coloured. But once they start to pick up dirt, the pores in the wood will soak up the dirt and it will go quite dark. So there's this brake van's actually been painted with a dark earth mixture, which is out of the Humbrol range. So it's like a little bit of, I think it's Humbrol 29 with a little bit of black mixed into it to make it darker still and slightly flat. And that's then been painted on as the timberwork. And to be honest, it's probably a little bit brown. It's still a little bit light. On the real wagons, these things are almost the same colour as the underframes, so they're almost as dark as the underframes. I'm going to go back to this Shark wagon as well. So this is a kit-built Shark. And this is actually something that I did a number of years ago, where I've painted the underframe black and then sprayed it to give it that dirty finish. And the funny thing is, I don't think it looks quite as realistic as the dark grey painted brake van. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to mix up some colours, and I'm actually going to paint over that original track colour weathering. I'm going to be a little bit more discriminating, so I'm going to get in there with a dark grey. I'm going to do something around the ploughs to highlight the dust and the ballast that will be picked up and caught on the ploughs, just to make that slightly more realistic. It's actually not quite as real as it ought to be. Anyway, that's it for grey. I've touched on yellow, and actually if I can reach over to my paint tray, I'll come back in a minute and I'll just talk a little bit about faded yellow.